Hey guys, it's Kevin, my review for Godzilla X Kong, or Godzilla and Kong, the New Empire. And in this film, Kong has really settled into his role within Hollow Earth. He has developed this family of his own, and basically, while he's trying to create this peaceful existence, there is this character known as Scar King, who really becomes this tyrannical leader of sorts that is really disturbing a lot of what Kong has been trying to build up. There's also this character known as Shimo, who's going to try to invade the Earth's surface, and so it is up to Kong to team up with Godzilla to really stop Scar King and all of the nefarious plans he has once and for all. Godzilla X Kong, I was very excited for this film. The way things went in these MonsterVerse films, I feel like they've each gotten better as they have gone along. And Godzilla vs. Kong, I think, was the best example of what we want to see in these movies. It didn't take itself too seriously. It actually gave us a pretty good reason for the conflict between the two characters, and also did a really good job, I think, at balancing both the monster and human elements. And, seeing Adam Wingard return again, I was just really excited to see what else he had in store for this franchise. I was looking, what other elements he could really bring here, because it really seemed like they had finally developed a formula and a rhythm that could really end up paying off in dividends. And so I was really excited to see how this was going to go. And then, of course, a few months ago, we had Godzilla Minus One, which was a distinctly different take on Godzilla than we've seen. It was far more serious in tone. It treated Godzilla like he was basically this, monster of sorts, and really just diving deeper into all the turmoil and, kind of hearkening back to the ideas of him being this, symbol for war and PTSD and things like that. And, you get that movie and you go into this and you're reminded that Godzilla is meant to be scary. Godzilla is meant to be this really, threatening presence. And then you go here and you just see how these films have turned out. So, while my excitement was still very much there, coming off of Godzilla Minus One, I wasn't really sure how this was going to be. Was this going to feel like it was going... Was this going to feel like it was kind of like a downgrade from what we had gotten in that film? I know they're completely separate entities, obviously, but just, seeing this character again, I wasn't really sure how that was going to play out, or if it was all going to fit together. And ultimately, I still really ended up enjoying Godzilla X Kong. I don't think it's nearly as great as I don't think this is nearly on the level of Godzilla vs. Kong. I still had a really fun time with this movie. There's definitely some things that do end up bringing it down, but I think this is still another really fun entry in this series overall. We are just getting into right now, starting off with the cast here. And when it comes to the human cast in this movie, there really isn't a lot to say. I mean, Rebecca Hall, once again, is very good here. You see the trajectory of her arc from the previous film. Eileen, as a character, has really progressed since then, and I really did like what she ended up bringing to the film. She very much is, like, the most level-headed of the characters in this movie, and I thought overall she did a really good job here. Brian Tyree Henry was such a huge standout for me in the previous film. I thought he provided some really great comedic relief, and I thought that he was just so much fun in this movie once again as Bernie. I'll get to his character a little bit later. There's some things they do with him that I'm not crazy about, but overall, I thought he was just a lot of fun here once again. I really enjoyed him, but especially having Dan Stevens in there, who is the easy standout in this movie as Trapper. I thought he was just so much fun in this film. I love the banter between these two characters. I think they work really well together. Trapper is just such a fun and enthusiastic character, and he brings that kind of just spirit to this film that we really do need. And I think that Stevens is just having such a blast in this role, and you can absolutely tell just how much he is enjoying this and how much he's putting into it. And it's honestly just infectious to watch. He is so much fun in this movie. I really enjoy him here. There's a really funny scene early on in the movie involving him and brushing teeth. That's all I'm gonna say, but my god, it was probably the funniest funniest scene in the entire film, and I just thought he was just having such a blast in this movie and really just ends up sucking you in and just keeping you engaged throughout. Even when the movie isn't fully working at points, I thought he just worked really well here. So I think those three actors work really well. But Kaylee Hottle, once again, I gotta talk about her. Once again, gives another really strong performance as Gia. I really liked her in the last movie, and I really like her here. She actually has a pretty significant arc of her own in this film. She brings a lot of heart to the movie, and I think that she does a really good job here. I want to see her in more stuff. I really enjoy her presence in this film, and once again, that really is no different. I really like I really just enjoy her in this movie. The dynamic she has with Khan, once again, does play a pretty big role here, but we really focus more on her as her own character and, you know, how she's fitting into everything, and I thought that she was just really great here. So overall, not really a ton to say about the cast, but I think everyone does do a really good job here. All right, so now we want to get to the directing and the writing, and the directing, I, again, don't really have a ton to say about. I think Adam Wingard, once again, just understood the assignment. He knows exactly what these films should be. Once again, just brings such an unabashedly silly and playful nature to this film, and it works really well. You can tell that he knows what this movie is supposed to be. He's not trying to take it too seriously, and I think he does a really good job with that, but also paying a lot of respect to both of these titans. You can tell how much enthusiasm he has for them, and I think that he just brings so much to to this film, and I think that the movie just simply wouldn't have worked without him. I think similar to how Godzilla vs. Kong, he just struck that perfect balance between humor and also this sense of heart, but also this sense of just exhilarating thrills. He does the same here, although he definitely leans more into the silliness of this film, and I think he does a good job with that, and I overall did enjoy his directing, so I don't really have a lot of complaints in that department. But now we gotta talk about the writing in this movie, which this is really where I think this film just really isn't as great as the previous entry. I think the previous entry did a much better job at having this relatively simple story, but finding a way to incorporate everything that felt organic and really just kind of fit in there in a way that felt kind of seamless, and that's not necessarily the case this time around. Now, there are some things this movie does do really well in terms of the writing. The things that work really well, once again, is everything they do with Khan in this movie. Similar to Godzilla vs. Kong, this is even more so his movie. He is by far the main character of this film. He has the most development. He has the most interesting ideas, and I just really like the way they decide to write this character. What Terry Rossio and Simon Barnett and Jeremy Slater, what they bring to this character is really well done. We see a Khan that is a lot older. He's kind of aging. He's not really in his prime in this movie, and you kind of see him kind of questioning some things about himself, and I thought that was actually a really interesting idea. I like seeing Khan in this older sort of role, and this mentorship he forms you know, with this character, Suko, I really enjoyed seeing. I like their dynamic throughout this film. It's very fun, but it also has this sense of heart to it that I think just otherwise wouldn't be there. I think just seeing the bond that they end up forming works really well. You really find yourself latching onto these two characters, and I really enjoyed what they ended up doing with the both of them. I think some of the best moments in this movie are just these two characters interacting, but also the way they really flesh out the world of Hollow Earth. You really get a sense that Khan has, you know, you saw in the last movie, he's now found his people. He's found his place, and you realize why this is such a peaceful sort of existence for him and why this matters so much to him, and I thought that the film did a really great job with that. The other thing I really admire about is that there are significant moments of this movie where there's barely any dialogue whatsoever. There's so many moments in this film of you just watching Khan in his day-to-day life and seeing all these different activities he's engaging in with this community and things like that, and I thought that worked really well in the film. In fact, there were points where I said, I don't really think we need the other characters in this movie. You really could have just had Kong, and that's kind of it. You know, you really could have had just Kong and maybe a little bit of Godzilla, and that's really kind of it. I think it works that way. I think they do enough in this film with that character especially that engaged me. I really did find myself liking what they did with Kong. And again, yes, this is a really dumb movie, but they actually do some really good stuff with that character, and I've really enjoyed just the trajectory of his arc throughout these movies. I think they've realized that, like, Khan is the best thing we have going for us, so why not just continue to build on it? And I really enjoyed what they did with him here. And I think, again, just the world of Hollow Earth is really well developed in this movie. So that's something I thought worked really well here, and I really enjoyed his whole dynamic in the film. So I think that part of the film works out really well. I think that the overall sort of lore that they get into when it comes to Hollow Earth, I think that they do a really good job with, but also the way they tie the human characters in here, specifically when it comes to the character of Gia. I really enjoyed where they went with her character. There's this conflict of sorts between her and Eileen, where Eileen has very much taken her in as her mother. They've developed this very close bond, but Gia also is kind of unsure whether or not she belongs on Earth. Is there a better place for her? Is there, somewhere that she is, is there somewhere else that she's supposed to be? Because if you remember, in the last movie, we know that Gia is this native of sorts, of this community that seemingly doesn't exist anymore. And while throughout this movie, they end up running into this Iwi tribe of sorts, and it kind of gets Gia to try to contemplate, is this where I'm supposed to be? Should I still stay with Eileen and continue to live the life that's built there? Or should I try to, become more entrenched with my tribe? Should I try to, bond closer with them? We really get more of a sense of a Gia that is more in her element in this movie. And I really like seeing her arc in this film. I like the places they went with her as a character. I think she's by far the best human character in this movie, like no question whatsoever. Similar to the last film, I just really like what they do with her in these movies. And I think if they keep bringing her back, I will be interested. I like what they do with her in this film. When it comes to the other human characters here, though, that's where things aren't quite as strong, and I'll get into that a little bit later when we get to, like, my flaws with the movie and things like that, but I really like what they did with her overall. I thought she was just really great in this movie, and I really like the overall arc they had with her, kind of trying to settle into this community and maybe getting more of an idea of what her life could have been like if she was able to, stay with this tribe and things like that. I thought they did some really great stuff with her. And I really enjoyed that part of the film quite a bit. But the biggest issue with the writing for me here is that if you've noticed, I've talked a lot about Khan, but I really haven't talked about the other Titan that the movie's supposed to focus on in Godzilla, and that's because the majority of this film, they don't really seem to know much of what to do with him. It's like they've exhausted every idea they could have with this character. They've done a lot with him in the previous two films, and here they're just not doing much. And I don't really fully understand this. It's like I feel like they did a good job of dividing up the characters in the previous movie, but this one we're only focusing on really the Khan side of things, so Godzilla really does take a back seat and literally ends up taking a back seat. Really does not do much of anything in this movie. There are little side quests with him here and there, but it never really feels like he has a role in this movie. He has a part to play within this story until he really needs to, until the film demands that he eventually has a role, and I just feel like there was way more they could have done with him. He's really put on the back burner in this movie until really the last 30 minutes, and I just found myself very underwhelmed by what they did with Godzilla. And maybe it's because, again, I just saw another movie that utilized his character so well and utilized him in a way that we haven't seen in a very long time. But I just needed more from Godzilla in this movie, and I just didn't really feel like we got enough of him overall. So that really is my biggest issue with this film, is I don't think the balance was nearly quite as well handled here as it was in the previous film. Like, the movie is called Godzilla X Kong: The New Empire, but it might as well just be called, Kong with Godzilla, kind of the new empire, because really that's how little of an impact Godzilla has in this movie for the majority of it. Like I said, eventually he does get in on the action, but it feels like he's just there because the movie is kind of forcing him to be. It doesn't really feel like he has much of a presence throughout this film as much as he has in previous, and specifically, Godzilla versus Kong. I thought they just did a much better job at still feeling like, even though he wasn't in that movie as much as Kong, it still felt like they were doing enough with him. Here, I just really felt like there was more they could have been doing with this character. But overall, I mean, this is still just a really fun screenplay. When you get to those moments, and I think that they did a pretty good job when it came to the writing and some of the new ideas they bring to the table here. But when it comes to cinematography, I mean, what is there to be said? This film is just so incredibly stunning in terms of color, in terms of action. The way that they construct these sequences between these two characters are so well done in this movie. When you get to those environments and just seeing these two, fight alongside each other, again, the movie just really delivers in that way, similar to how they did in Godzilla vs. Kong, but even more so in this movie, to the point, and it really does end up at, being the highlight of this film, to the point where the audience next to me, I mean, they were freaking out over the fight scenes in this movie. Like, this was some of the greatest stuff they've ever seen, and those are the best kind of theater experiences, when you have the right crowd that is as into the movie as you are. And while I wasn't quite reacting on that level, I still was just really so exhilarated by how fun and kinetic these action set pieces are. They really just do such a great job with them, and the film just really ends up going all out in that way. But again, the way that they build the world of Hollow Earth and these different locations these characters go to, I thought were really well handled. I think that they felt very tangible. They felt very well fleshed out here, and I really enjoyed the cinematography in this movie. I thought that they were very well done. There are some moments people have pointed out that does look a little bit shoddy. There's one scene especially that people have posted onto Twitter that, yeah, it looks a little artificial, it looks a little weird. It involves a scene at a school. I'm not going to say much more than that, but yeah, it looks a little phony the way that's constructed. But overall, the things the movie needs to deliver on in the cinematography, it absolutely does. Specifically, again, and also just the look of Kong and Godzilla. Once again, it's just chef's kiss. They both look so great in this movie. I love the way that they both are constructed, and I really couldn't ask for anything more when it comes to that side of things. The score in this movie, again, Tom Holkenborg really never disappoints. He really does deliver another really kick-ass score once again that I think enhances the tension and enhances your excitement on what's going on. I think he does a really good job with that. And the pacing in this movie, I mean, this is easily the most fast-paced film out of any in this franchise. This is very much like we are doing whatever we can to get to the stuff that you've come to see. We're not really wasting any time here, and in that way, the film is very accessible. It's very easy to get through. It's very easy to suck you in, although I do think there are some elements that do feel kind of rushed here, and this is really where we get to my issues with the film, in that I just think that as a film, this film is just very haphazard in terms of a lot of its storytelling. There are just some things that don't feel nearly as well fleshed out as they could be. I talked about how I think the strongest sequences in this movie are Kong and everything we get with Kong and, everything we get with Kong and Zuko. I think those are some of the best scenes in the entire film. But the whole conflict that's going on here, it just never feels as well fleshed out as it should be. And that's almost why, like I said, this could have just been a Kong movie on its own, of you seeing the destruction, Kong trying to maintain this peaceful existence, but also kind of question his overall purpose, within the world, and him kind of dealing with this like midlife crisis of sorts, and him trying to train Zuko and the bond they end up forming. But then, Scar King comes in there and ends up really wreaking havoc on the world. I think that would be a great film all on its own, but the problem is Scar King as a villain just feels so underdeveloped. I don't feel like we really got to see the threat that he poses. It's more so what he ends up doing, the destruction that he causes. Yes, it angers you, it upsets you, you want to see, you care about Kong, and you want to see things, you want to see this resolved. You want to see him be able to, continue to maintain this existence that he's created and things like that. But I never really felt like Scar King as a presence was all that threatening, was all that well developed. I didn't really feel his presence throughout the majority of the film, and I think that definitely did hurt it in some aspects. Again, when we get to the actual, third act and things like that, I really don't have much issue with that at all. I think they did a good job with, what they end up doing with his character and things like that. I thought they went to some really exciting places there. But the only other real issue I have with this movie is, I talked about how well I enjoy the character of Gia and how I think that she was very well developed, but the other human characters in this movie, they just don't really know much of what to do with. They do this arc of sorts with Eileen, and her kind of struggling to be a good parent to Gia, and it just feels so underdeveloped. I don't feel like they dive deep enough into it. They try to kind of lay on some emotional moments, and they are effective because I enjoy these characters, but they just don't feel super well fleshed out here. I feel like we needed more moments between the two of them to really get me to latch onto that storyline overall, and the film just didn't really end up doing that, so I think that was really a problem. And then also, the character specifically of Bernie, I just really felt like the film did not know what to do with. He was such a huge standout in the previous film, but here, most of what he does in this movie is this recurring gag of him wanting to, create this podcast and shoot all this footage, but maybe he shouldn't. Maybe he's struggling with whether or not he should shoot all of this, and if this is a good thing for him to do, and he has this bond of sorts with Trapper. There's this back and forth between them that works really well, but it just feels like they don't really know what to do with him as a character other than just be really quippy and silly, and the same goes for Trapper. Once he's introduced, the film doesn't really know much of what to do with him. So there's points where these characters are just audibly reacting to things that are so obvious as to what's going on. They're spouting exposition that we really just don't need. It feels like at points that's why the human characters are here. They're just here to spout exposition. They're just here to react to stuff in a way that we really don't need to see. I know that this is a big deal. I know what you're talking about. This is not that hard to understand, and it just feels like you're trying to dumb things down for us, and I don't really like that. I don't think the movie really needed that. I feel like they needed a bigger role beyond just reacting to what's happening. Like, I know that people don't like the human characters and they want less of them, but I feel like the previous movie, they utilized them in a way that felt like, okay, they actually fit in this movie. They don't feel like they're bogging down the film. Here, it feels like they don't know what to do with them. It's like, well, we're supposed to have human characters, but do we really need to give them anything that's substantial? Not really. And so I think that was overall an issue for me, that I think they really just needed to hone in more on what you can do with these characters, hone in more on, ways to keep them interesting, because every time we cut back to them, the film is infinitely less interesting because of it. There's also some moments that just feel kind of convenient here. Like, there are things that need to happen, and the writing demands it happens. Like Khan having a robotic arm, for example. The reasoning they give for that happening, again, it just feels a little bit far-fetched. Like, we need him to get from point A to point B, and this is the only way we can come up with that's going to happen. So we're going to have him do this thing, and it just doesn't feel as organic as it should. It doesn't feel like it fits as well. It feels a little forced in that way. But, hey, it's still really fun to see, so I'm not going to complain all that much at the end of the day. I just wish those things were utilized a little bit better and fit more into the story than they really did, because things do feel a little bit more random this time around. Overall, it really doesn't take away from just how much fun of a film Godzilla x Kong: The New Empire really is. It does a great job of further fleshing out the world of the Hollow Earth and really developing the character of Kong specifically and putting him in a very different spot than we've seen him in previous films. Really delivers in terms of action set pieces. I mean, you really just can't go wrong when it comes to just seeing these two characters just lay it all out and seeing them destroy buildings and things like that, and all this crazy shit that's happening, and Kong having like a robotic arm and all this stuff. I mean, there's so many fun ideas they do with that. The film really does a great job also of diving into some of the other characters. Gia in particular, I think, remains a really big standout within this franchise. It does at points have some characters that it really doesn't know what to do with, and there are some elements that I really wish the film dived deeper into. Particularly Godzilla is really put on the back burner in this one, and the film doesn't seem to know what to do with him for the majority of it. But overall, I still had a really fun time with this movie, and as long as they continue to have all these really creative and fun ideas throughout, I think that these films will end up being really successful. I know Wingard has said he's not going to continue directing these movies, but as long as they're able to continue having the tone that these previous two films have, I really do think this will be a very successful franchise moving forward. I'm really interested to see what else they're going to bring to the table here. I just hope that whatever they do moving forward is a little bit less of a bare bones story than what we did end up getting here, because sometimes it can feel like there needs to be a bit more going on, and there just really isn't. But I think if you're here to just see these two characters fighting and, seeing all this destruction and mayhem, the film will very much not disappoint in that regard, and I think you're going to have an absolute blast with what this really does end up delivering on. So overall, I really did enjoy this movie, and I'm going to give Godzilla X Kong: The New Empire overall a B-. But over, guys, in my review of Godzilla X Kong: The New Empire. Let me know what you guys saw of this movie or all, left your thoughts, and we'll see you guys in my next video, and I will see you guys for that. Okay, bye.
Hollywood infected, you're